Good morning, dear students. Once again, I am back with my lecture on the chapter Bricks, Beads and Bones, and the topics which I am going to take up today would be discovering the Harappan Civilization, which includes subtopics Alexander Cunningham, John Marshall, R.E.M. Wheeler, then piecing together the past, classifying finds, and finally the problems of interpretation. So the previous day we had ended our discussion on the decline of the Harappan civilization, and there were a whole lot of reasons being quoted, but till date archaeologists are not sure what would be the exact reason for the sudden decline and disappearance of the Harappan culture. So taking our discussion from there, we see that over the time people forgot about the Harappan civilization, and but what happened actually, occasionally people would dig the earth, or farmers would be plowing the field, or there would be some occasional floods, and owing to all these things, all these phenomenon like digging and plowing and excessive floods and all, some or the other artifacts surfaced on the earth, that is, which got buried deep below the earth, they surfaced up. But men and women, they never bothered to find out actually. It's quite natural, even if we find so many things around us, unless and until we have interest in that, we would not go further with that. So even if the artifacts were found in broken condition, in mutilated state, but nobody really bothered to study that or to hand it over to somebody who really knows about it. So this Harappan civilization was almost forgotten. Taking our topic further, we see discovering the Harappan civilization. So the time period which we are talking about is that time when India was not independent and it was under the British rule. The first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India was Sir Alexander Cunningham. He was actually a British engineer, British Army engineer. His rank was Major General, and he was quite interested in archaeology. So he took over as the first Director General of ASI, that is Archaeological Survey of India, and he started conducting certain surveys all over the Indian subcontinent. But interestingly, what was it? He took texts and inscriptions as some source of reference, or in for referring to certain things, he took his source as texts and inscriptions. So when the survey was conducted under his guidance, when his team was conducting survey, he would collect, he would document, and he would translate whenever he would find any interesting inscription or any textual matter. He would collect them, he would document them, he would translate them. But for him, the Indian history was actually something different, which we do not consider as Indian beginning of the Indian history. For him, the Indian history, the time period of Indian history was the time period of the coming up of cities in and around the Ganga Valley. Cities emerging in and around the Ganga Valley. So for him, the time period of his reference, he felt that Indian history began with the cities that emerged in and around the Ganga Valley, and he was familiar with the Indian history between circa 6th century BCE to 4th century CE. He was not aware of any happenings that took place before 6th century BCE. So what happened? Even if he got hold of any of the artifacts, unless and until he felt that they were of some cultural value, he did not pay attention to those finds or artifacts, and he referred to the accounts left by the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims. The texts and accounts left by the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims were used by Sir Alexander Cunningham as his point of reference. But these Chinese Buddhist pilgrims had come to the Indian subcontinent in the time period between 4th century CE, 4th to 7th century CE. According to the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, Harappa was not any early historic city. So, what happened? Even if Harappa had certain artifacts which were valuable, since they were not included in the accounts left by the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, Alexander Cunningham did not give importance to that. Even it is said that one of the Englishmen, he handed over any important seal findings from Harappan settlement, but Sir Alexander Cunningham did not understand the value of the seal, and he did not give importance to that seal. So much of the valuable information was lost just because Alexander Cunningham did not know anything about the Indian history beyond circa 6th century BCE. For him, Indian history began with the emergence of the cities around the Ganga Valley, and for him, the time period of Indian history was 6th century BCE to 4th century CE. So since Harappa was never mentioned in the accounts left by Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, therefore, Sir Alexander Cunningham never gave importance to any of the Harappan settlements, nor did he give any importance to any of the artifacts that were found from the Harappan settlements. So this happens to be called Cunningham's confusion. Cunningham's confusion. Many a times in the board exam, it comes as a 3-mark question. What was Alexander Cunningham's confusion? So we have to mention the points that Alexander Cunningham, he used the reference point based on the accounts left by Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, and for him, Indian history began with the emergence of the cities in and around the Ganga Valley, and he was aware of whatever happened in the Indian subcontinent between circa 6th century BCE to 4th century CE. He did not know anything beyond that. And the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims had visited the Indian subcontinent between 4th century to 7th century CE. So since Harappa was not known to them as any early historic city, so these Chinese Buddhist pilgrims never mentioned the name of Harappa in their accounts. So much of the valuable information was just lost this way. Coming to John Marshall. John Marshall was another archaeologist who was a British archaeologist, and he also took over as the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India. Under him worked 2 eminent Indian archaeologists, and somewhere or the other, I'm sure you might have heard their names. So they are Dayaram Sahni, who had discovered seals in Harappa, and Rakhal Das Banerjee, who had discovered seals in Mohenjo-daro. So both Rakhal Das Banerjee and Dayaram Sahni, they are known to have had immense contribution in the discovery of the Indus Valley Civilization, because based on their discovery of the seals in both Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, it was understood, or it was realized by the archaeologists, that whatever artifacts have been found from Mohenjo-daro as well as Harappa, they belong to the same archaeological culture. They say belong to some similar kind of settlement. So finally it was announced to the entire world when John Marshall was the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India. Under his leadership, it was announced to the entire world about the discovery of another new civilization known as the Indus Valley Civilization. And for the first time, the entire world came to know that something called Indus Valley Civilization also exists, and it is considered to be contemporaneous to the Mesopotamian civilization, because people were aware of the Egyptian civilization, people were aware of the Mesopotamian civilization, but hardly people knew about the Indus Valley Civilization, and it was announced in the year 1924 when John Marshall was the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India. Again, John Marshall, though he was a very eminent, noted archaeologist, and he was a professional archaeologist, and he had worked previously in places called places like Greece and Crete, and he had brought his professional working experience to the field of archaeology in the Indian subcontinent also, but he had also made some mistakes which we are going to see. He and his team had started excavating the mounds in Mohenjo-daro as well as Harappa, but the mistake which he did was that even though the mounds were excavated, they were excavated along regular horizontal lines. So the excavation took place along regular horizontal lines. But what was missing actually? What was missing actually was the stratigraphy, the layer. Because a mound has layers of soil, and artifacts might be embedded in every layer. So he missed out the stratigraphy. He ignored the stratigraphy, or the layers of the soil, and what he did was, whatever artifacts were found from the same horizontal when the excavation was made in a mound, whatever artifacts were obtained from a particular horizontal unit was grouped together as a single unit. So artifacts which were found along this horizontal unit was grouped together as belonging to the same unit, even though they may be belonging to different stratigraphic layers. So he ignored the stratigraphy, that is the layers of the soil, because we know that the more we dig down and down underground, the more we dig down, we will be finding more older artifacts. But he had ignored that. So again, a lot of valuable information was missed this way because he had ignored the stratigraphy. We'll be talking about R.E.M. Wheeler also, who was an ex-army brigadier. He was again a very professional archaeologist who had brought about his working in army. Being an ex-army brigadier, he had brought his military precision also to the field of archaeology. So we are talking about Sir Robert Eric Mortimer Wheeler, in short known as R.E.M. Wheeler. Again, during his time, he was the Director General of India, Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, and even during his time also a lot of excavations had taken place, but he did not commit the same mistake which was done by John Marshall when he was conducting surveys and excavations. He made it a point to see that the stratigraphy was taken into account while studying the soil layers and collection of artifacts. Over the time, excavations took place, a lot of findings came up, but when Indian subcontinent, we know that a lot of historical changes, political changes came up, and there was partition of India into India and Pakistan. So we see that much of the Harappan settlements fell into the territory of Pakistan. Even some of them were in the territory of Afghanistan also. Very few of the settlements were located in India. So the Indian government also started the work of excavations to find out more such settlements and to excavate more such sites of the Harappan settlement which falls within the Indian territory, and as a result the sites like sites in Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat came up. Over the time we get to know about the sites like Dholavira, Ropar, Lothal, Chanhudaro, Cholistan, Banavali, Rakhi Gadi, and so on. So we see that compared to Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which were considered to be the earliest cities which were excavated by the earlier archaeologists, much of the settlements like Dholavira, Ropar, Lothal, Cholistan, Banavali, Rakhi Gadi, they have been located and excavated in more recent times, and currently even the excavation work is still in the process. Who knows, more such sites of settlements would come up, and we see that now modern techniques are used for excavations, even surface exploration. Modern techniques like surface exploration is done. Then analysis of every scrap that is found, whatever artifacts are found, if every scrap, analysis of every scrap is done, every scrap is being done. So we have talked about the discovering of the Harappan civilization under the leadership of Sir Alexander Cunningham. Then though he had missed out much of the importance of the artifacts that were found from the Harappan settlement, which were finally recognized during the time period of John Marshall, and we also see what John Marshall missed out during his excavations. Then R.E.M. Wheeler and his contribution. Now we are going to take up the topic, piecing together the past. Whatever we know about the Harappan civilization, that is Indus Valley civilization, is totally based on history that has been reconstructed, because none of us have seen them. How did the people live? What were the subsistence strategies? What did they eat? What did they drink? What did they wear? We do not have any photographs. We do not have any pictures. So how do we know about it? It is totally reconstructed based on whatever artifacts have been found. Now, reconstructing is not a very easy task, because when artifacts are collected, then we have to see that there are certain artifacts which are made of perishable items. For example, artifacts like clothes, cotton clothes, leather, wood. These are all perishable items. Even if the people of the Harappan settlements might have made these toys and tools and all, hardly they might have survived, because these are perishable items. So much of the artifacts are not present today. What remains in the hands of the archaeologists are the metal tools, metal items, beads, stones, clay items, that is pottery made of terracotta. So these are the things from which one can reconstruct history, because we know that till date Harappan script has not been deciphered till date. We do not know what has been written there, what has been mentioned there. So everything is based on reconstruction, and whatever artifacts have been found, history is being reconstructed based on that. And as a reference point, the archaeologists have taken the help of the toys, the tools, the seals, etc. Next is classifying finds. Now suppose we have a whole lot of finds which have been excavated from a single mound. The next thing is, it's a very big task to classify them. One method of classification could be that classifying things based on what material they are made of, whether they are beads, whether they are stones, whether they are items made of metals, whether they are costly, whether they are inexpensive. That is one method of classification. Another method of classification is based on their function. We have never seen any person from the Harappan settlement use a saddle quern. We have not seen a person from the Harappan civilization using a copper mirror or beads necklace. But still we know that they had beads. With that beads they made jewelry. They had beads with which they might have made rings and all. So how do we get to know? Because we are familiar with these things. We are using those things till now, till date. So based on that, based on our current knowledge, we are able to reconstruct about the items that have been found in those times. So when we talk about classifying finds, one way of classification is based on the material. The materials can be metals, beads, pottery, then cotton, wood, leather, and so on. Next is based on their function. So based on their function means based on our current knowledge, that what is the purpose of a bead, what is the purpose of a mirror. Based on our current knowledge, we reconstruct about the Harappan settlement. The functions based can be reconstructed in another way also. Like, where were those items found? One is based on our current knowledge. And another is based on the location of these finds. Which means that where were these artifacts found? Whether they were found in some drains, whether they were found in some graves, whether they were found in some kiln, or whether they were found inside the houses. So the function varies based on where they have been found. So when we talk about classifying of finds, we talk about classification means based on the kind of material, based on the function of those items, and based on function is also reconstructed based on where they have been found. Another way of finding out the function is indirect reference. Suppose we get a piece of cotton cloth that has been recovered from any of the Harappan settlement. Now we do not know what were the way of dressing of the Harappan men and women, but still we can reconstruct some kind of history from there, which exactly what the archaeologists and historians have been doing by studying of seals, by seeing the images that have been made on the seals, on the pottery. They can reconstruct the kind of dress they wore, the kind of animals they used, the kind of animals they domesticated, the kind of animals they hunted. All these things can be reconstructed from, partially from the seals as well as from the pottery also. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion is problems of interpretation. When we see artifacts, we can classify them and we can place a whole lot of theories that this is this and this is this. But finally, we have to interpret and we have to get a result that exactly what is the purpose of this, what is the purpose of this structure, what is the purpose of this statue. So that is the most difficult thing which the historians, even the archaeologists, they have to face in this field. Like there are many artifacts whose significance is exactly not known, their purpose is exactly not known, that why they have been made, what was the purpose for which these artifacts were made. So the archaeologists have had a great difficulty in reconstructing the religious practices. But still, they have tried their best to reconstruct the religious practices of the Harappan people. And how did they do that? By studying of seals, by studying of the pottery. They have found out that nature worship was very common. They have found plant motifs in the seals, which shows that nature worship was very common among the Harappan people. They have also found a mythical image in the seals, which looks like one horn. It looks like a horse, but it has a horn, one horn, and they have named it, archaeologists have named it unicorn. So this has also been found in the seals, even in the pottery also. So they have, archaeologists have tried to relate the plant motifs, the animal motifs to that of the religious practices of the Harappan people. Even a statue has been found. The other day we were discussing about the priest king. In many of the settlements, the statue of the priest king has been found, and the archaeologists have tried to relate the priest king to that of the rituals, to the ritual practices of the Harappan people. Then in many of the settlements they have found a statue of a female statue having elaborate headdress and heavily jeweled, and they have tried to, many of the archaeologists have named it as the mother goddess. So priest king, mother goddess, they have been related to that of the religious practices, that these statues have some relation with the ritual practices of the Harappan people. And many of the structures that have been found in the Harappan settlements, the purpose of those structures are not exactly known, but again the archaeologists have said that they have related those structures to that of ritual practices. One such structure is the Great Bath, and another one is fire altar. The Great Bath in Kalibangan, fire altar in Cholistan have been related to that of the ritual practices of the Harappan people. Again, there are many things which are still left to be discovered. Often the archaeologists find it difficult to directly relate anything to the religious practices. For example, one of the Harappan seal shows a statue which resembles that of Lord Shiva sitting in a yogic posture, and he is surrounded by bulls. He is surrounded by animals on all sides, and many of the archaeologists have said that it resembles this statue sitting in the yogic posture, the proto-Shiva, which has been mentioned in the Rig Veda. So this is, many of the archaeologists have suggested that the seal containing, that is something related to Shiva, a figure which resembles that of Shiva, is actually proto-Shiva. He is sitting in a yogic posture and he is surrounded by animals, which can also be called a Pashupati. But again, to confirm it, whether this is really proto-Shiva or not, again there were discussions and debates also. Like many of the archaeologists have said that if this is proto-Shiva, as mentioned in the Rig Veda, then in Rig Veda, Shiva has been mentioned as Rudra. And Rudra never sits in a yogic posture, and Rudra never sits, according to the Rig Veda, Rudra, that is the name of Shiva which has been mentioned in Rig Veda, Rudra never sits in yogic posture, and Rudra is never surrounded by animals. That means it is not Pashupati. Rudra is not Pashupati. So what is the seal actually? What does the seal depict? Again, many are questioning, is it a shaman? A shaman means a person who establishes contact with the supernatural, and he has the capability to cure certain diseases and all. So it is said that whether this is shaman or whether this is proto-Shiva or whether this is Pashupati. So you can just see the way I have explained, you can just find out that even the historians, even the archaeologists are not sure, because to give a particular opinion they have to go through a lot of things to authenticate, because it's the whole world. It's not about the history of India, it is not about the history of the Indian subcontinent, it is the history for the whole world, and history has to be written in a correct way. So unless and until it is authenticated that what does a particular figure designate, or what does a particular image or any seal designate, nobody can exactly write that this is this and that is that. Nothing can be said in exact black and white. So as you can see, Indus Valley Civilization, again, we can talk about the Indus Valley Civilization as a civilization which we can boast of, we can feel proud of for having so advanced techniques of making tools and pottery and advanced method of town planning. But in spite of that, in spite of so much studies being going on, and in spite of having the contribution of so many archaeologists, it is still a mystery. The script of entire Indus Valley Civilization is a mystery, and efforts are being made to unfurl the letters and alphabets, and maybe in a few years from now somebody might be able to unfurl and decipher the meaning of the words and the alphabets. So that was all about today's lecture, and I hope that your concept about the bricks, beads and bones Indus Valley Civilization is clear to all of you. Thank you so much.